Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Navigating USDOT Grant and Credit Programs. My name is Tom Lang, Assistant Director of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region's Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. I recognize that is a mouthful. We're going to introduce that organization and program area shortly. But before we do that, I am here to lay the groundwork, set the stage, and give you some context for why we're all here on this Tuesday morning, early afternoon, talking about federal financing. I know many of you are here on this webinar today as project sponsors or potential project sponsors in need of gap financing to push your transportation infrastructure project over the finish line. So it is our hope that this webinar will demystify innovative financing options, answer your questions about federal grant and credit programs and public-private partnerships, and encourage innovative thinking around financing your project and the many other critical projects here in the Pacific Northwest. Before we move into the agenda and introduce the PNWER RIA, the Build America Bureau, USDOT grant programs, credit programs, and some of the resources available to everyone around the country. And then at the end of the 2 hours, we're going to talk about some case studies of organizations that have moved through the TIFIA process. Before we do all of that, we have a poll question because we want to find out who is here with us today and what projects are kind of front of mind for you. What are you thinking about as we discuss innovative financing? So you should see it pop up on your screen, our poll questions. First, what is your project that needs funding? You can type in as much or as little as you'd like, but just briefly share with us, what is it? Is it a bridge replacement, or is it an airport enhancement? Maybe it's a new highway interchange. There's a lot of different types of projects that we might cover in this area, but we want to find out what's top of mind for you. And then second, a few more questions, kind of drilling down on exactly what the project is, and we like to share with everyone who's in the room and what kind of projects are being represented on this webinar. So you can tell us if it's a rail project, a highway or bridge project, transit, TOD, port or marine, aviation, all of that. And of course, there's some that might cross the boundary and be a couple different types of projects. So share with us a bit about the project, total budget, if you know that. We would love to find out, are these big projects, smaller projects? And I'm seeing the answers come in here, which is great because I can tell there's a variety of projects being represented during the webinar today. And the last question is really interesting. How far along is the project? Is it still conceptual? Is it part of a transportation improvement plan? Maybe the engineering's already done, or is it shovel ready and just need that last bit of gap financing? So we're going to give you a few more moments to answer this poll question. And as some latecomers join us on the webinar, we'll ask them to also answer this poll, and then we'll share the results with you so you can see just what kind of projects are being represented today. And I also want to call out that after this webinar, at any point, we are very happy to answer your questions and talk more about these projects. So let's connect. You can see our contact info, both myself and our Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program Director, Bruce Agnew's contact information on the screen. We'll share this a couple more times. We really do want to be in touch with any and all of you about these projects, answer questions, and share more resources as appropriate. So be in touch. Okay, let's share the results of this poll now, and we can let everyone see what kind of projects are here. Lots of rail projects, port and marine projects. Most of them are in that $10 to $50 million range and mostly conceptual, though one shovel ready and a couple more that have some preliminary engineering done. So this is great, and we'll take a look in more detail at the different types of projects that are represented here in this poll. But thank you for sharing. Let's move on. I would like to introduce now our Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program Director, Bruce Agnew, who's going to tell you a bit about the Pacific Northwest Economic Region and our role as an infrastructure accelerator.
Thanks, Tom. The Pacific Northwest Economic Region, or PNWER as we're known, is a binational public-private partnership created by state statute in 1991 and governed by state legislators who oversee our project and program. Because we are in statute, we can act as an ad hoc legislative committee. Now, as you can see from the slide, um, our states include Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, as well as Western Canadian provinces and territories. We have 16 working groups covering all aspects of economic growth. Most popular is our Legislative Energy Horizon Institute, a 60-hour boot camp for legislators to learn all things energy. Over the last 10 years, we've had 500 graduates go through, and 5 of our members have moved up to Congress. We are hoping to establish a similar academy for transportation. Now, just a couple of events coming up on June 3rd and 4th. We are holding a special cross-border transportation and supply chain emergency preparedness event in Bellingham, Washington, around the upcoming FIFA World Cup in Vancouver, BC, and Seattle in June 2026, the world's largest sporting event. Our summit is in Bellevue this year, July 20th to 24th, and in Edmonton, Alberta in July 2026. We also have a supply chain and high performance rail conference in October in Portland. One other note about the PNWER program, we are in constant communication with our senior and bipartisan congressional delegation on transportation energy program reauthorizations. I just returned from a trip to Washington, D.C. And so keep us in mind as we look at the reauthorization program, particularly for transportation that the House Transportation Committee is engaged in currently. Now, PNWER's Regional Accelerator has been a two-time recipient of funding from the Build America Bureau of the U.S. Department of Transportation. The Bureau provides a portal for our projects to access funding opportunities in all of the federal operating agencies. So it's federal highways, federal transit, maritime administration, FAA, federal railroad, as well as Amtrak. And we're pleased to note that Elaine Clegg from the Valley Regional Transit Agency in Boise, Idaho, is our Northwest representative on the Amtrak board. Now, we tend to view transportation in 3 dimensions, with projects that cover surface and marine modes as well as aviation. Now, the Accelerators program is to bundle projects in metro and rural areas along Northwest trade and travel corridors. We also stack federal, state, and local grant, loan, and credit programs, always seeking to engage private investment capital in the projects through innovative finance and project delivery, which is the mission of the Build America Bureau. So we consider ourselves a field office for the Bureau. Now, Build Northwest Council is led by an advisory committee of Legislative Transportation Committee members and leadership working directly with state DOTs and the private sector, firms in engineering, consultant firms, finance, and energy leaders from the private industry sector are part of our private sector council. We educate policy leaders on innovative finance opportunities. That's the reason we're having the webinar here today. We provide very important technical assistance, especially to smaller and more rural communities and tribal nations who lack the ability to write grants and structure loans. We convene public and private leaders to advance transportation investments along our Northwest rail and highway and marine corridors and gateways. And we explore ways to integrate energy and transportation planning for economic growth. We also provide an opportunity for our Canadian colleagues to share their best practices in successful public-private infrastructure partnerships. Now, the program areas, I won't go into a lot of detail. I mentioned Build Northwest. Critical Connections, that's our program to connect rural areas and tribal nations, replacing and improving connective infrastructure, things like bridges, particularly rural bridges, ports, both sea and inland ports, and roads. High performance rail. The Pacific Northwest rail system is a critical component of our regional economy and intercity transportation network. because freight and passenger rail utilize the same fixed rail infrastructure. Investments by public agencies or by the host railroad have benefits for each other, and resulting in faster movement of inland agriculture and other commodities, global markets via rail, and a greatly expanded passenger rail network for the Northwest corridor and Intermountain region. We also deal with projects like grade separations and fish and wildlife crossings on rail corridors. Our relatively new program, Innovative Supply Chains, advances resilient supply chains and logistics hubs by integrating new technologies, data-driven solutions, public-private partnerships, and smart infrastructure using intelligent transportation systems. One of the sessions we're going to cover in Bellevue is the railroad's use of artificial intelligence to improve their operating performance and safety. Now, the next slide has a poll question, and I don't know, Tom, do you want to do this now, or do we want to do it later in the session?
No, let's ask now.
Okay.
It's yeah.
Well, as you all probably know, the reauthorization of the bipartisan infrastructure law is before the House of Representatives now and the Transportation Committee, and soon to go to the Senate or relevant authorization committees. And so we're looking at discretionary programs, the kind of programs that many of you have either been successful in applying for or are seeking funding. Programs like MEGA and Infra and the PIDP, the Port Improvement Development Program. We feel at PNWER that we need these discretionary competitive programs to allow some of our projects that I just referenced a chance to compete nationally. Now, most of the federal funding for transportation is distributed to our state DOT through formula funds, and that's important and that will continue. But these discretionary grant programs, particularly if they're partnered with a loan program, can make the difference in getting the project completed. Another area that we believe strongly in is to ensure that there is continued federal funding for local programming. I'll talk a little bit later about that, but the kind of programs that's distributed to cities and counties and ports, it's very important that we don't lose track of those very important programs for local jurisdictions, or particularly in rural areas. Next slide. Oh, I guess the question, we'll pose a question and then I can't, let's see, I'm reading now, sorry. Do you believe there should be robust, competitive federal discretionary grant programs, like I just described, in the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Bill? So let's turn it over and see what people think.
Okay, let's see the results. And again, on the slide, you can see our contact information. We want to stay in conversation with all of you on this topic. So take a look at those answers, see if that resonates with everyone else in the group, and let's be in touch on the reauthorization process in the coming months. We're eager to hear your perspective, especially folks from across the region, rural, tribal communities. Every corner should be represented in this process.
There's I think one more slide. Yeah, this one is interesting because the Northwest has been fertile territory for the Bureau in terms of their credit programs, and we're going to hear from Carl in the program about these programs. Here's the list. If you noticed, I think the most notable one is the successive loans to Sound Transit. I think they have secured $4.3 billion in loans. They are the largest TIFIA recipient in the U.S. Also, we're going to hear later from the city of Mount Vernon about a very interesting library and commons project. Right now, one of our focuses in the Accelerator is to look at states that are away from the I-5 corridor, Alaska, Idaho, Montana, rural areas and rural bridges and road and rail improvements. How can we get those folks more engaged in looking at the loan programs? And we do that through our partnerships with local organizations, three of which are significant. The Alaska Municipal League is our partner. Idaho Local Highway Technical Assistance Council works with local jurisdictions throughout Idaho. And in Montana, we partner with the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. So again, we believe strongly that these programs to support local financing are very important. And I'll turn it over back uh, either to Carl or back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Bruce. And once again, here's our contact information. We'll send out these slides afterwards so you can find a way to get in touch with us if there's any questions, if you want to talk about projects or share your thoughts on the reauthorization process. We are eager to be in contact with all of you. So thank you. Thanks, Bruce. I want to now introduce Carl Ringgold, Program Manager for the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator program at the Build America Bureau. And Carl is going to tell us a bit about federal credit programs, TIFIA, RIF, public-private partnerships, and public activity bonds. All of those good things. Carl, whenever you're ready, I'm going to let you take over the slides and introduce yourself more.
Thanks. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, that looks great.
All right. I'm going to go off camera. Otherwise, you'll just be looking at the side of my head. Real quick, thanks for the intro. Thanks everyone for being here today. Carl Ringgold. I manage our Regional Infrastructure Accelerator program, but I do want to give kudos to a former colleague, Sam Beydoun. He and I started this program together. We're going into our fourth round of funding, and we've supported some work that I think collectively we are very proud of. So not just me. Real quick, I want to talk about our office, the Bureau, what we do both on the finance and technical assistance side. And I also just want to highlight a few other departmental programs that are outside of our office for folks' edification at the top. So Build America Bureau, Bruce mentioned we are currently going under RIA for BIL. Previous Surface Transportation Bill, the FAST Act, is what established the Build America Bureau. So back in 2015, our office was established primarily to house the department's credit finance programs. TIFIA had historically been administered by FHWA, RIF historically administered by FRA, all housed in one office. The Build America Center that Sam represents was really the first technical assistance program to come under the Bureau's purview. Regional Infrastructure Accelerator program and a few others have followed. So we are a technical assistance office through our capacity, either programmatically or just with folks here, as well as the office that administers our credit finance programs. So again, we, the Build America Bureau, in the Office of the Secretary, specifically under the Office of the Undersecretary for Transportation Policy. We have an Office of Outreach and Project Development, mentioned the TA office, a risk office, underwriting office, and portfolio managers. We work primarily with the, funding operating administration. So you'll see not every mode is listed there, NHTSA, motor carriers, PHMSA, but typically modes who you can think of that have their own discretionary programs that provide oversight are the modes that we primarily work with: FHWA, FTA, FRA, FAA, and MARAD. Real quick, before I jump into our office and what it is we do here, I did want to highlight this is not official guidance. This is Carl doing his best job to pull together some information about some of the other modal programs, right? Non-bureau discretionary programs. This is not every single one, but to the best of my ability, I just wanted to pull together some information. So at the top is Build. I think Build is the one program within the Office of the Secretary that everyone tends to know about. Previously RAISE, right? We're now back to Build, and this program, frankly, has seems to deviate names across administrations, right? It was Tiger at one point, probably a few other things. You can see its purpose there, right? Who's an eligible recipient, some key features, and when NOFOs are typically released. And so I will not read every single line to you. Again, this is not every single program, but to the best of my ability, not counting FHWA, not counting a few of the other modes, for programs that I am aware of, that still exist. This is my attempt to sort of tell you when we anticipate those NOFOs coming out. I do know within FHWA, many of their programs are still going through a review by the new administration, and no real decisions have been made or handed down. So I didn't feel comfortable putting anything there. But for the multimodal projects discretionary grant program, right? MEGA, Infra, CRISI, and FTA's programs, low and no emissions, bus and bus facilities, passenger ferry, and the one FHWA program that is there, Safe Streets and Roads for All. This is my best attempt to sort of show where those programs are, right? What some of the key features are, what its purpose is, who's eligible to apply, and what, if anything, has changed. There's a lot of change going on right now that we all are aware of. And to my knowledge, best of my knowledge at this point, none of the modal programs have been cut, right? But they're still going through this review where none of these NOFOs have been issued just yet. So I anticipate many of these things being over the horizon. Naturally, I'll share these slides and be available for questions. But this is just at the top, what I'm seeing around the department for some of these other discretionary programs, all right? So now to our programs, to the Bureau's credit finance programs first. So I already mentioned TIFIA, the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, all right, historically administered by FHWA. Here for TIFIA, we're talking primarily about surface transportation, and with TIFIA TOD, any associated public infrastructure or development. Financing is for 33 to 49%. The 49% has become a lot more acceptable and encouraged over the last few years, whereas historically, the appetite really wasn't to lend beyond the 33%. But even beyond our Rural Projects Initiative and some other initiatives that I'll speak to, it seems that the 49% is being accepted and encouraged at this point. RIF, the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing Act, right, historically administered by FRA, deals with passenger freight, commuter rail, and TOD. Financing for RIF can be anywhere from 75 to 100% of your eligible project cost. And our private activity bonds really function no differently than, seeking bonding from market, but can be used alone or in combination with TIFIA or RIF, which makes it attractive. These aren't every single feature, but some of the key features for TIFIA and RIF are obviously the loans, loan guarantees, lines of credit, right? Fully negotiable terms and conditions, tailored repayment periods, right? Which tends to depend on the life of the asset. It's not like you can just choose 75 years. It really depends on the life of the asset. Optional 5-year deferral, right? After completion of construction, no prepayment penalty. And what's not mentioned here is you do not accrue interest on a loan until funds are drawn down. So, let's say you take out a $100 million loan for 30 years, but in the first 15 years, you only draw down $20 million. You would only be accruing interest on the $20 million that you've drawn down. As of 4 days ago, interest rate for a 30-year loan, right, but 35 years, if you consider the 5-year deferral, was 4.89%. Not as low as it was, 5 years ago during COVID, but still relatively low. And these are set by the Department of the Treasury. We go by the Treasury rates. I know this table looks like a lot, but what I'm trying to do here is just show what the general features, again, of each program is. In terms of eligibility, again, TIFIA tends to deal with surface transportation, right? And any associated public infrastructure or transit-oriented development. RIF, rail, pretty much any rail or rail TOD that you can think of is included there. Same sort of credit products, right? Both federal assistance programs. The cost parameters are different, right? There is no minimum or maximum with RIF. The max loan, amount could be 100% of your eligible costs. There are some parameters here with TIFIA, right? Again, key feature is 49% now, but still having to take into account the 80% of total federal share. There's a $10 million minimum threshold, as well as some parameters around the RPI, Rural Projects Initiative program, that I'll get into. No credit ratings required for RIF. They are required for TIFIA. Must be investment grade, which is a BBB- or higher. And our credit subsidies, right, are appropriated by Congress. And, you know, at least since the 90s, they've not gotten rid of the program. So I think we have some staying power in that regard. Real quick, our Rural Projects Initiative. We started the TIFIA Rural Projects Initiative to do exactly what it sounds like, help rural entities, right, have more access to our programs. So there's still the $10 million minimum threshold, but so long as the eligible costs do not exceed $100 million. And we use the Census Bureau definition for rural. So outside of an urbanized area, the population less than 150,000. All right. For projects under 75 million, borrower and advisor fees are waived. So during the underwriting process that I'll speak to, both legal and financial advisors are procured. All right, that cost typically passed on to the sponsor. And so if you're a sponsor coming through our Rural Projects Initiative, if your project is under 75 million, we pay those fees for you. All right, and the interest rate is half of what you see for the regular TIFIA program. All right. Real quick, an example of an entity that has worked with us under the Rural Projects Initiative was the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. All right, the project was the Rural Two-Lane Advancement and Management Plan Project, or ODOT RAMP, as we've called it around here. The total project costs were just under 100 million, as you can see there. Two separate loans, right? Loans that were split into two different tranches. I'll talk more about revenue, but their revenue pledge in this case were taxes. And this project was all about safety and savings, right? Vital roadway and highway projects around the state that on their own, right, perhaps wouldn't have been able to meet any of our minimum thresholds. But the entire focus here was, savings by borrowing money to construct the projects faster, and safety, right, due to some metrics and issues that they were dealing with. So the loan resulted in significant cost savings and safety benefits, right? And you can see the time and money saved there. And as we move forward, right, looking at the next slide, some of the impacts included, 8-foot shoulders, rehabilitating and resurfacing roads, extending and widening bridges, all the different locations around their state, right? Again, this was a program of projects put forward by the state DOT, right? Mostly rural places, all rural places rather. And again, projects that on their own probably wouldn't have been able to seek funding or financing from any other sources. So a lot of time saved, a lot of money saved, all focused on savings and safety. And an example of a state DOT utilizing our credit finance program, right, but also taking advantage of the Rural Projects Initiative. I know there will be a lot of questions about this. Frankly, I may not be able to answer them all, but there is also an emphasis within TIFIA, right? And it's become, I guess, less of an emphasis since we're encouraging 49% for all projects, but specifically for transit-oriented development, right? We would really like to see entities maximizing the authority and borrowing up to the 49%. So this includes any public transportation, but also, transit-oriented development. And I'll speak to some of that. We've had quite a few entities in both our Regional Infrastructure Accelerator pipeline and our TIFIA pipeline more broadly take advantage of the new TOD authority. When we're talking about TOD, tend to talk about either public infrastructure or economic development. And I won't read to you, but we do our best here to define, what is public? What is infrastructure? What is the combination of public infrastructure? And then what is economic development, right? And again, these are things that we encourage, that we hope to see as a part of applications that are coming into the TIFIA pipeline, all right? So again, public, just real quick, any asset that is owned, developed, or operated by the public sector, right? Infrastructure or elements of the project or site for development, be it land acquisition, right-of-way acquisition, utilities, what have you, all right? And economic development, you can see that there. It's not included, but not limited to commercial and residential development and related infrastructure. So we encourage these things. So an example of that, and frankly, I'm not sure if it's the best example because Denver Union Station kind of predates the TOD authority, but it is still a viable example of how it could work. Though it's not mentioned here and it's not quite TOD, there are enough elements in it that make it a good example as well. The Maryland Purple Line, they've recently borrowed from us. And while the project itself isn't really a TOD project, it supports a broader sort of transit-oriented development ecosystem. But Denver Union Station, right, historic redevelopment of a train station, private sponsors, right, private sponsors led the financing, $519 million in project costs, and a bunch of different sources of funding and financing for this project. A TIFIA loan, various federal grants, becoming a regional transportation district, obviously private investment. And if you've never seen Union Station, it's beautiful, right? 22 acres, TOD, over 100,000 daily passengers utilizing the multimodal hub. And they borrowed from us, right? So again, while this example predates the authority, I think a very solid example of how the TOD statute within TIFIA could work. Just, compelling takeaway. I know we may have some private folks on the call or folks who are working with the private sector on projects, right? And oftentimes, private entities are able to drive things perhaps a little quicker than we can. In terms of our financing process, I will try not to get too in the weeds here. Generally speaking, there's an initial engagement that can be formal or informal. We're talking to a project sponsor or a potential project sponsor about a project in relation to, how they may be looking to utilize our programs. Maybe not every box is checked, but we are confident enough that we're moving in a direction where they will be coming into our pipeline, right? They will be really looking to borrow money from TIFIA or RIF. So, we put you in our project development phase. And during that phase is when we, ask folks to give us a letter of interest, a formal letter of interest to formally get you in the pipeline. A credit worthiness review is done. And at this point, you're kind of handed off from one of our project development leads to an underwriter. And due diligence is being done, right? Terms and conditions are being negotiated. You submit an application. And at that point, things aren't quite binding, but we're as close to binding as possible because once you submit your application, that's when the process of procuring legal and financial advisors is done. After that, approval and financial close, your loan agreement is signed, and then you're moved over to our portfolio management team who disperses your, payments or disperses your funds and collects any repayment. So at a very high level, that is our process. Initial engagement, right, which is pretty informal. Project development, you're assigned to a PDL who's talking you through all of your financial requirements and everything else you need to do to actually finalize your letter of interest. LOI is submitted. You're now assigned to an underwriter. They're doing their due diligence, negotiating all the terms and conditions. Your final application is submitted, all right? And then that leads to the loan agreement. Sam knows this. Our old director would say it all the time. We're always working towards yes. We're always sort of trying to find out ways to make projects work for our programs, be it, with some of our technical assistance, utilizing our grant programs, or whatever the case may be. The one sort of genie that we cannot rub out of the bottle is a source of revenue. You either have it or you don't. And this is not everything, but these are at least just some examples of sources of revenue. Again, it's not to disparage or condescend. It's just simply to say sources of revenue are challenging, right? Financing major infrastructure projects can be a real challenge, but it is the one thing that, again, we can provide, I think, assistance everywhere except conjuring up a source of revenue for you. So these, again, just at a high level, give some idea of what those potential sources of revenue can be. In terms of federal requirements, these are all the federal requirements that we look to see and we expect, a project that is entering our credit finance pipeline, to have and to have satisfied. Aside from the indicative credit ratings that are required by TIFIA, and I'm not saying this is a good thing per se, but if you are a transit agency or a port authority and you are, navigating any of the aforementioned modal discretionary programs, you will have to satisfy these federal requirements anyway. So, recognizing the challenge associated with the source of repayment, if you are looking at any of the respective discretionary programs, these are the same federal requirements you would have to satisfy there. And frankly, no one project has the same challenge, right? NEPA tends to be a challenge for some, but I've found, at least in Washington, right, surprisingly, Davis-Bacon tends to be an issue there, right? In a state like Washington, where you already pay very, very, very high wages across the board for a lot of jobs, there's a question that we get very often from sponsors in your state about Davis-Bacon, right? I encourage any potential sponsor to always be working with your state DOT. If you're a highway project, please be in touch with FHWA. If you're a rail project, please have a contact at FRA. You'd be surprised how many folks come to us and want to navigate our programs, but they don't even know how to, get on the step or tip. And so when it comes to federal requirements and satisfying them, both through the utilization of some of our grant programs and the direct TA that we seek to provide, the way I said, we can't necessarily create magic for you with the source of revenue, right? And how you repay a loan. We are always trying to help sponsors who want to navigate our programs, navigate how to satisfy these federal requirements. That's something that we do just as a natural part of our jobs, but also more specifically under the auspices of some of our grant programs. I mentioned historically, when I started, 80% of the TIFIA pipeline were highway projects. And that's historically because, FHWA administered the program, and, tolling as a source of repayment, or, gas tax revenue as a source of repayment often made the connection between, highway financing and the utilization of our program very easy. It gets a little more difficult when you start talking about transit and TOD and rail and what have you. But there's been a concerted effort amongst, some of the folks here to really diversify the pipeline and see more than just one mode kind of dominating what we have going on. And this is just a brief illustration of that. In terms of our TA programs, and these are the Bureau's TA programs, and I manage the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator program. There are some questions about some of these programs, particularly thriving communities and where things go, right? Where and if more funding will come in. So just at a high level, I want to mention these other programs, with the caveat being there are more questions than answers about where some of them stand. So the Thriving Communities Program, I know quite a few of PNWER's sub-recipients are involved with that program, but it's meant to support disadvantaged and lower capacity communities across project planning, scoping, development, design, and delivery, all right, at a very high level. And again, they're just questions about where that program goes. The Rural and Tribal Assistance Program, I can tell you that NOFO, the next iteration of that NOFO is imminent. That team is working very hard to get it out, all right? Same thing for the Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Program. The hope is that another NOFO is imminent. I know that team is working very hard to get it out. The Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program, my program to date, we've awarded $34 million to 24 accelerators, all right, but 21 unique entities. PNWER in round 1 and 3 was a multi-awardee, as Bruce mentioned. The Fresno Council of Governments for the Trade-Port California project was a multi-round recipient, as well as the San Diego Association of Governments. So we've made 24 awards, but to 21 unique entities over 3 rounds of funding. As it stands now, we have $20 million available. A NOFO is out that is due June 16, and we have a very open-ended scope, right? And I'll read a little bit more about that in a few slides. Now, some of these are programs like the Build America Center, Sam Beydoun represents. Some of these are just resources that have become available post IIJA and BIL. Folks are always asking me, about discretionary programs, when NOFOs are issued. I promise you, it's not like we have some running calendar that the department circulates, but the DOT Navigator, at least in my opinion, and being here over 10 plus years, is the best attempt that I have seen at creating a real, running repository of the department's discretionary programs, where they are, when NOFOs are being issued, when things are closing, what have you. So I encourage you to look at that. The Thriving Communities Network, again, there are just some questions about that. But for the Reconnecting Communities Institute and the Project Initiation Accelerator, we attempt to leverage really dollars that are associated with these 2 programs to help some of our other programs. So, for example, we have one Regional Infrastructure Accelerator that is standing up a corridor development office and hoping to, have a major projects coordinator to help them move their NEPA forward, right, for a very major project. And for where some capacity may be lacking, the idea is we could use some of the resources available under the Project Initiation Accelerator or Reconnecting Communities Institute to help leverage that. And then I mentioned our direct TA and strategic partnerships. We will answer any call from anybody, anytime, to talk about a project and how it may work with our program. Some of this is redundant. As I mentioned, we provided $34 million to 21 unique entities over our first 3 rounds of funding. For some folks who are on the call who may have applied, we had a NOFO that was open, closed Jan 9 for $10 million. The new administration had us rescind that NOFO. It has been reissued. In that time, Congress did pass a continuing resolution. That CR gave the program another $10 million. And the collective is what is out right now for $20 million. So we lost a little time, but we gained $10 million, which is good. For the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator, we assist regional entities, right, in developing improved infrastructure priorities and financing strategies for the accelerated development of projects. And assistance can be in the form of project planning, studies and analyses, right, be it feasibility, market, project costs, value for money, environmental reviews, right, what have you. Revenue forecasting, preliminary engineering and design work, statutory and regulatory compliance analyses, very open-ended project scope. Pretty much anything short of capital construction or the direct procurement of buildings, right, or vehicles, we can help fund and support. This map shows in the first 3 rounds the awards that we've made. When Sam and I started in round one, we had $5 million. We got $6 million in requests, and we were able to make 5 awards. Round two, same thing, $5 million, about $7 million in requests, and we're able to make 5 awards. In round three, with $24 million, we had about $70 million in requests. And so the first time that we were really seeing the program reach this level of oversubscription. You can see various entity types. In round one, though PNWER is not a council of governments or an MPO, I think it has a very similar function. So in round one, we're looking at councils of governments and MPOs, not direct delivery entities, though they have a role in the delivery of projects. In round two, right, all but one of the entities who we awarded were direct delivery entities. And in round three, you can see a lot of diversity there, right? We have awarded an executive office, a governor's office actually applied, multiple transit agencies, state DOTs, local transit agencies, cities, counties, what have you. So the program has grown and is growing. Real quick, I just want to highlight, knowing that we have Bart, one of our round three recipients here, to talk about both their RIA experience, but also experience as a TIFIA borrower. I didn't want to steal any momentum there, but I just wanted to highlight one of our RIAs, SANDAG, San Diego Association of Governments. In round one, we gave them $1.47 million. All right, they're partnering with the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency. There were 2 rail corridors that they were doing various work for, both the Sprinter and Lausanne Rail Corridors. They're partnered with the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency, Port of San Diego, as well as the North County Transit District. All right. Their project tasks for the respective corridors, both Sprinter and rail, was to, beyond the study management and coordination, it was to do a corridor assessment, look at the best practices and peer reviews, develop their investment strategy, create a public benefit analysis, and produce a final report. Now, they did procure contractor H&TB to help with some of this, but the final report was meant to inform San Diego's board, made up of 16 or 18 or so county executives and mayors from a very diverse, bipartisan, right, kind of surrounding area, and really give them, the best information possible on how to proceed with the reconstruction of these 2 respective rail corridors. So the goal of the corridor assessment in particular was to, assess the corridor, look at the market conditions, what are our opportunities there, explore new ideas. Part of this was H&TB actually developing financial case studies for them. They looked at 3 other TIFIA loans, 3 other entities who had come through the TIFIA process, MBTA in Boston being one, and showing them, hey, this is how they did it, this is how you could potentially do it, and reviewing those funding and delivery approaches to really determine what their best approach forward would be. It spoke to project readiness, right? Financial readiness, what the benefits for the stakeholders and market is, right? And what the opportunities are. Those 18 counties or 16 counties that I mentioned spend upward of $300 million a year just ensuring that the tracks stay operational due to various, coastal erosion issues and what have you. So, money is being spent, but they need to focus on how to spend the money to actually reconstruct the project. And the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator program helped them figure that out. So I'll stop there. You have both my direct email as well as the RIA email. If you email either one, I'm always available. And I recognize we need to pass this off to our 2 case study folks here today. So I'll be able to answer questions at the end, but I know there was a lot of information. I'll certainly share these slides. And thank you. I hope some of it was helpful at least.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. That was we call it a crash course in the Bureau's work, and it really was a lot of information all at once. But thank you. We're gonna share these slides afterwards, and of course, feel free to reach out to Carl at any point with more specific questions. We do actually have a couple questions already here in the Q&A, and I encourage all of you to also use that Q&A function to ask any questions you might have. And since we have a few minutes, we're a few minutes ahead of schedule, I'm going to go ahead and ask these two questions of you, Carl, if that's all right. First one, would a TOD project need to be included in a transportation improvement plan or a state transportation improvement plan, a TIP or a STIP? Okay. Yes. And another question on these kind of rules, regulations around TIFIA and RIF and low interest federal loans. If an entity qualified for a low interest loan through the Bureau, can the entity still apply for federal or state funding for the project to pay back the loan? I'm assuming through a grant.
So there have been some changes post BIL and IIJA, and I don't want to get too nuanced and give wrong direction there. Generally speaking, federal dollars as a source of repayment isn't necessarily a source of repayment, right? In doing due diligence, whatever your sources of repayment are, all of those things would need to be known and determined on the front end of a loan closing. So if you are, closing a loan this year and you're hoping that next year you're successful for some federal program as a source of repayment, that really wouldn't meet, that really wouldn't pass that test, if that makes sense. And I would say the same thing for state funding. So I don't want to give a coy answer. The short answer is it depends. But I think what's more important is periods of time, right? And so all sources of repayment, no matter what they are, have to be determined, right? And sort of be set in stone on the front end of a loan closing. So one example an underwriter gives, I've heard an underwriter give it at times is, let's say you're borrowing, $10 million and your state legislative body says, we're going to give you $7 million over the next 5 years. Well, our underwriters would fully expect for some accounting of that other $3 million to be known on the front end of that loan closing. Couldn't be we're going to apply for this funding over these many years and hope to get it. That diligence would be done on the front end. So assuming that funding is there and it meets all the thresholds in terms of the 80%, maybe, but it would really depend on a point in time more than anything else, I think.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. One more question, and I hope that our guest speakers from BART and Mount Vernon Library Commons will also kind of answer this through their own experience. But Stephen's asking if there's a typical time frame for how long it takes a project to move through the initial engagement to an actual loan agreement and funding.
It can take 6 months to a year, right, for all of that to play out. By no means am I defending our bureaucratic process. What I will say is we on this end typically want to move as fast as the sponsor wants to move. Sometimes a sponsor comes in and they say we want to close a loan in 3 months. We'll tell you that's not realistic. But what the last thing that we want to do is procure advisors, the costs associated with doing that, right? That clock starts and there's some federal requirement that we've not satisfied. So prior to a project going into our credit worthiness phase, we typically want to make sure as many, T's are crossed, I's are dotted. And if there is something, right, floating around out there, there's a very clear, definitive timeline on when that particular thing will be satisfied for us to move forward. Because again, there are costs associated with procuring advisors. Those costs are passed on to the sponsor, short of you being under 75 million, right, and applying to RPI. So we want that process to be as painless as possible, right, both financially and from a timing perspective. So 6 months to a year, but we are always sort of working to move as quickly as possible. And again, typically it's something on the sponsor's end that stops the process from moving, not us changing our mind at some point, right? So
right.
And I saw the comment saying some states allow use of state funds to repay. Yes, right. If a state allows for some source of revenue that is great. We encourage that. What's important is whatever the parameters of that source of repayment is, right? Meeting the terms of the loan. So I only gave the example of a legislative body appropriating funds for a certain amount of years just to say that that diligence, right? All those things making sense on the front end has to be done. But no, we have seen many states offer money through different sources of repayment for that purpose.
Right, right. And so going back to that timeline question of how can we maybe push it closer to a 6 month timeline rather than 12 months, I'll just offer that the PNWER Regional Infrastructure Accelerator is also here to support, provide technical assistance, and hopefully move everything along as fast as possible so it doesn't grind to a halt because there was an unforeseen issue on the project sponsor's end. And that gets to our next section, which is a few more resources available to everyone here in the region and across the country. So I'd like to thank you, Carl, for that presentation. Keep the questions coming in the Q&A. We'll take a look at all of them at the end. And if we don't get to answering some of them, we'll follow up by email afterwards with answers to those. And now I'd like to introduce Sam Badoon, who's the Technical Assistance Lead at the Build America Center. And Sam, I'm going to let you share your slides and tell us more about the Build America Center.
Thank you, Tom, for the introduction. Let me see. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, yep, they look perfect.
Excellent, very good. Yes, my name is Sam Badoon. I'm a senior advisor to the Build America Center. Prior to that, I was at, as Carl and Bruce mentioned, I was at the Build America Bureau. And I was the technical assistance lead at the time when I started with the Build America Bureau. The technical assistance program was just at its inception. So in the process after starting up the program, the Regional Infrastructure Program and the Build America Center, before we started the Build America Center, we recognized that with all these programs and technical assistance and the funding opportunities and what we're asking the public entities to do in developing their projects, it's all probably recognized it's all something new to them and they needed some assistance to help with that. So we partner with the USDOT and Federal Highway, partner with the University of Maryland and the partner in universities, as you will see, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, to provide technical assistance to potential grant recipients or in general entities who are considering innovative financing applications for their projects. So to help in the early development of the project, to help guide what the funding program or financial structure for a project would look like, and just to do early analysis to get the project ready for either development or to start procurement or at some point look for the financial assistance from the Build America Bureau and USDOT. So the Build America Center was established in April 2021. And it was a consortium, or this still is, consortium of several universities strategically placed in various parts of the country. We have the University of Stanford as a part of our Build America Center collaborative effort. They are mostly focused on the western region of the of the country. And most of their expertise and the specialty assistance will be more in the project finance and look at innovative ways of financing project. Purdue University in the Midwest, they their expertise and area of focus will be mostly on engineering and some finance. In Georgia Tech, to look at construction management, and particularly as it would involve in P3 procurement, focusing on the long-term operation maintenance of a project during the P3 agreement and the project life cycle. And in the Northeast, of course, Virginia Tech, mostly on the engineering side, and program delivery, program management. So we are very proud to have those universities as part of our consortium at the University of Maryland. In addition to that, we partner with the private sector, I'm sorry, with public entities, trade organization, if you will, and consultants. So on the consultant side, we have part of our support is the Rebel Group. They have worked on several projects, P3 projects, some of them on the West Coast. We also partner with the AASHTO, National Association of County, National Government Association, National League Cities, the AI, ARTBA, and AMPO. In other words, we reach out and get collaboration and ideas and support from um, a whole slew of entities that would be a stakeholder in the project delivery methods and project financing. And we get their support. We bounce ideas from them. We do a lot of research activities, and we bring some of those experts into a focus group or studies, or just to review some of our research projects in the area of alternative delivery and project finance, innovative project finance. So what do we do for the public entities who are looking for support from the Build America Bureau or Federal Highway or Build America Center? Is we're looking for project eligibility scan, eligibility in terms of if there is a NOFO that the USDOT, Federal Highway, or the Modal Administration have issued, we can help the public entity look at their eligibility to apply for the funding opportunity. We can also look at the project itself, look at funding strategy, where would, from lessons learned, best practices, where would the likely project financial structure would look like? What's available for the project and what the project could be eligible for. TIFIA and RIF programs, those are financing programs, subsidized financing program from the federal government. We also look at state, what's available at state level and local level, and to analyze what that financial structure for the project would look like. We also can help, for example, the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator as an entity who's looking to deliver a program, or an MPO who's looking to deliver multiple projects that are included in the program. So we do program analysis on whether it's project readiness or whether project delivery method or financing opportunity for innovative financing. We do also provide assistance in cost benefit analysis. As you would know, most of the notice of funding opportunities and grants, but they will require, some of them will require cost benefit analysis for larger projects. So we do provide support for that, and we build tools to help assess what the benefit cost analysis from a certain project would look like. We also assisted, and we do assist some public entities who are looking at developing an application program, or an application for a NOFO or funding or grant opportunities. And we help in the past, some entities write an application for grant opportunities, and we have been successful in getting our client, if you will, the support they need and get the successfully win a grant opportunity. We also look for innovation in the project. So when we look at project and we see an opportunity for innovation, as a research institution, we can recommend opportunities for innovation for the project to be included in the project, which could be in some cases part of the merit requirement for grant and award. So we can help with that. All of that is done at no charge to the localities. And because we are under a cooperative agreement with the USDOT Federal Highway, we do provide, and the Build America Bureau, we do provide those services free of charge. However, we have limited resources. So I would hope, that to say that someday that we can provide resources to all the applicants, all the public entities, but at the present time, resources are limited. So over the past 3 years, we have been very busy. We have developed several tools to help guide, navigate the federal opportunity programs since the introduction of the IIJA. And so many grants are available out there. It was appropriate, and FHWA asked for us to develop a database, if you will, that will house the various notice funding opportunities, the requirements, and what could be appropriate for what project and all that. So the IIJA Launchpad was launched, and it's very instrumental in developing application, helping localities identify funding sources. We also were very instrumental in matching the project, with funding opportunities. We have done in our database, we have compiled a successful application database that will look at the projects and what they have done right to gain or get awarded for the project. So we do have that type of assistance in research and data analysis available in the IIJA Launchpad. We also have data to support application for Safe Street for All, and other programs as well. But one of the most recent programs that we are working on, the tool development, is the State Infrastructure Bank, which could be very good tool for innovative financing for localities to consider when financing their projects through a low cost financing in addition to the federal level, that will be at the state level. We also organize webinars and workshops, mainly focused on alternative project delivery. My area of focus is P3, and I have been involved in delivering P3 projects for a couple of decades. So we have provided workshops, for building capacity, raising awareness about what P3s are, and the such. So as I said, we have been busy. As you can see, the Launchpad has large number of users. The data coverage, we have over 100 NOFOs, and in our database, we have over 7,000 awards, 4,000 localities. We gather all the information and employ the AI tools to do data analysis to help the client develop their projects and look for funding opportunities. Recently, and this Grant Plus tool, it will be available probably around the end of this month. The Grant Plus tool will focus on four different areas. It will look for funding sources, opportunities, how you can combine federal and state and local level for funding sources to help support the project. Look at innovative finance opportunities for whether it's state infrastructure bank, TIFIA, RIF, and look at combination that on how to build the innovative financial structure for a project with the idea of bringing down the cost of financing for the project. We also look at the track of accelerator project delivery. I mentioned P3 as one of the delivery methods, but there are some other delivery methods that could be appropriate for the project, depending on the size and complexity and introduction of innovation to the project. So it could be design build, progressive design build, construction manager, general contractor, or construction manager at risk. So it's not just, where the money is coming from, but how we're going to deliver that. And we'll also look and match opportunities as well. So could be a very good tool, and hopefully that we'll have it up and running here at the end of the month, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions on that when the users start using it, and we're happy to help.
Sam, I hate to interrupt here, but I just wanted to flag we have about a minute or two more before we have to move on to our case studies.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Just these are examples of things that we have done, technical assistance. We talked about the innovation research. In the area of P3s, we'll look at how long it will take to deliver project from inception to construction implementation. We've done research on that. We have tools available. We have conducted workshop, as I mentioned before, notably for the regional infrastructure accelerators. We have conducted P3 workshops in San Diego for SANDAG, and Bruce attended one of those some time ago. So those are the type of resources available. And recently we have supported particular projects in Oklahoma, North Central Region Planning Commission, and in Maryland. And it's not just highways, it could be bridges, it could be ports, it could be transit or rail projects. The technical assistance in terms of funding opportunities and financing. One of our most recent work is the State Infrastructure Bank, and we are working on development that. Some states use it, some states have not used it, but it's an opportunity to get low-cost financing for a project. As you can see, we're all over the country with some of our programs, and on the West Coast, Midwest, in the Gulf area, and on the East Coast as well. So that's a snapshot of what we do. We're happy to help, and please feel free to reach out if you have any projects, you have any questions as to what data is available out there, what grants are available, if you need help with support with applying for a grant, or if you want project-specific help on analyzing if the project is ready, what needs to be done to get it ready, look at the development of the project itself. So please feel free to reach out. The QC or Professor QC, he's the director of the center, and I'm here to help him as a senior advisor. And as I said again, we're happy to help.
Thank you, Sam. We will include the contact information for the Build America Center in our follow-up email, as well as these slides. So take a look at them in more detail and reach out, of course, if you would like any assistance from the BAC. Thanks, Sam. I'm going to pivot us now to a case study. And you may have noticed on that last slide, the Build America Center is working on their own set of case studies, one of which being Mount Vernon Library Commons, which we are happy to highlight. It's here in our backyard in Washington State. And we have with us on the call Jill Boudreau, who is the former mayor of Mount Vernon and kind of the key player in moving that project forward from inception. She'll tell us more about it. She's currently the senior policy and project manager at the Whatcom County Executive's Office. So shifted jobs and moved a little bit north of Mount Vernon, Washington. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Jill, to tell us more about the Library Commons project and how the TIFIA process worked for you.
Wonderful. Just testing, make sure everyone can hear me okay.
Yep, you're great.
Awesome. Great. And then I'm sure someone could pull up the slides, or did you want me to do that? I apologize.
Yeah, can you do that? It'll probably be faster if you do it.
You bet. So
while you're pulling those up, I'll just say if anyone is driving I-5 between Seattle and Vancouver, BC, the Canadian border, you'll see it from the highway, Mount Vernon Library Commons. It's a, what, 4-story building, I think, brand new, just opened in September, I think it was last year.
It did, yes.
Yeah.
So apologize, when you work on 3 different screens here, trying to get the right one. All right, can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, that looks good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Well, it's really exciting to be here today. It's a project that's, of course, near and dear to our hearts in Mount Vernon, but in the entire region, as was mentioned. So just to give a little bit of orientation, let's see, can you see that okay if I scrolled?
Yep,
Maybe not in
great.
presentation mode. Okay. So the Commons, Mount Vernon is located up in the far northwest corner of the state, so right in between Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia. Our small city has about 36,000 in population. We are the county seat of Skagit County, and folks that have traveled up to this area might know us as the gateway to the San Juan Islands, but also to the North Cascades, which is just a gorgeous place in our world. So a little bit about the project itself is, as any municipality or government, that you have long-term plans, and we knew we needed some structured parking in our downtown area. We knew we wanted a public library, and so we just started thinking, okay, if we as a small city can do one project, maybe we can't do several, but we could do one. If we combined all of these uses, maybe that's a way to go, which is really how it kind of ended up into the Mount Vernon Library Commons, which does combine the parking, library, meeting space, and a commercial kitchen downtown. We're also just directly diagonal from a transit location, and so we have the transit component of folks that might be taking the train into Mount Vernon. They can come across over, they could park, they could, at our structure, take a regional bus line, that kind of thing. And so we have a really strong transportation connection in the project. All right. It also represents a $61 million investment. We started at 43 when we first started doing some conceptual design work and ended at about 61. We do believe that we are just an amazing example of how to use federal funding. The TIFIA loan was really key to us, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also our chance to build new construction that was a model of sustainability. And so in our project, I mentioned the components, the parking specifically, we have about 269 parking spaces. 76 of those are equipped with EV charging. We believe that we are the largest public charging infrastructure in the country. And so we're really proud of that. We also incorporated e-bicycle charging stations. This was based on feedback from our community when we started our design work. And so we have bike charging lockers. I mentioned that we're considered transit-oriented development, and we have transit stops incorporated. Our building, as far as sustainability, is all electric. We have a huge solar array, and we are the first, we believe, the first publicly bid passive house building, at least in Washington state. And we've really pioneered things like concrete mixes and the way to build public facilities. The funding mix itself looks a little bit like this. You had several federal uh, funding sources, including a HUD Section 108 loan. We had an appropriations directly from our congressional delegation, and we received the U.S. Department of Transportation charging and fueling infrastructure grant funding. But we used the TIFIA loan as kind of a financing tool for us, even though we received, more or less grants as well. Our state was a really big proponent of this project. The city, of course, had funding in, and then other local funding included some from Skagit County and private library foundation. We had an adopted budget with about 58.3 million available, and we came out of the project with $3 million in debt. Okay. Federal agencies that were engaged or involved. So I think we were kind of unprecedented in this as well. We had, of course, U.S. Department of Transportation. We had our HUD folks involved, and we actually had Department of Energy. At the time, there were some block grants that were given out to jurisdictions, and so we took advantage of that as well. The addition of more than one federal agency did, I have to say, provide some complexity, but we were able to navigate through that, which I think makes our story a little bit unique, and just something to share that it's not impossible. And we felt really strongly about the government itself was a proponent of not only EV infrastructure, but transit-oriented development, and a proponent of using funds with the COVID funding coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. So, all right. State agencies that were involved, we had our State Department of Transportation, Department of Commerce, and Department of Ecology as far as state. And then when we were kind of talking about federal funds, they were really, really scary to us. And I'm not sure if our folks that are online might feel the same way. But from a small city, we never really did go for federal funding prior to this project, simply because it was intimidating, I think. I think there was a lot of work when we talk about NEPA versus, say, our State Environmental Policy Act things. We didn't have a lot of experience there except with our HUD funding, but we knew that we couldn't do this project without using the federal funding and the opportunities that were in front of us. So our different approach to these different things, so grant writing, we did not have the funding to hire a grant writer, so it fell on my office personally, and a few other folks that just had talent within our organization to do that. We looked at a lot of different successful grant documents and just thought, okay, if we model this after some successful grant documents, we could get there. The BCA, the benefit cost analysis, was a little bit scary to us at first, but when, again, looked at examples, at the time, DOT put out some good webinars about that, so we took advantage of that type of training. We then also had a local university, Western Washington University economic students. We kind of put together a framework of how we were going to do it, and then they helped us and kind of proved out that the way we were doing our methodology was good, so we received some special help from them. That was a really awesome thing. Our NEPA, it was really interesting because we had funding that was coming from both HUD and eventually federal highways. We were required to do 2 different NEPA processes, but we successfully advocated that since we had NEPA completed for HUD funding prior to engaging with USDOT officially, that the federal highways really took the HUD NEPA, they went through their process and ultimately accepted essentially the HUD process, the HUD NEPA, which I think was really an important step in looking at efficiencies and maybe somehow getting the federal government to take a look at standardization. Because even in USDOT, federal VFTA was looking at NEPA different than federal highways. I'm sure this isn't news to anyone, but we really had a kind of a collaborative spirit between these agencies to get us through the NEPA. Buy America, we actually received a Buy America waiver for over 24 different items in our project. They were items that literally were not made in the United States. There was no way to make them in the United States at the time. And so we went through the Federal Register process and obtained a Buy America waiver. I think it was in record time. I think it took about 7 months to get through versus a couple of years. There was no standard process for that either. We just took a successful Buy America waiver application, which happened to be the Golden Gate Bridge, followed that format, and then just followed the process and all the way through, really persistent around that. Davis-Bacon, things like we're not that unfamiliar with procurement, but we just knew that there was the laundry list of procurement rules that we made sure we needed to follow. And there was a little bit of competing oversight. The USDOT Build America Bureau really helped us through who was going to be assigned oversight because we had the CFI grant and the TIFIA loan. It all ended up going to the federal highways. And so we worked very closely with our our local office of federal highways in Olympia, and they were amazing partners to help us through that. So all in all, I would say that it is really tedious, but federal funding was not impossible for small cities like ours. So just talking specifically about the TIFIA loan for us, we qualified for the rural initiative, which was like unparalleled product to make, say, our financing easy, well, not easy, I guess, achievable for our city. So, costs were covered. The interest rate was half of Treasury. We were, I think, the first transportation-oriented development project loan, not an exclusively transportation project. And so that was a first. Our interest rate is 2.39% at a 35-year term. So we calculated we saved about $15 million in interest over time, and it made any payback debt service terms for us doable within the city. We did come out of this with a little bit of debt, but overall, out of a $61 million project, to have $3 million in debt going forward was pretty phenomenal for our city. This is just trying to be a little light humored. So at our closing call, we were all online and I threw us all into a fun celebratory background. And so the folks that worked with us, hired by Build America Bureau, were really amazing. The attorneys at Skadden and the folks that were at the Build America Bureau really walked us through every step of the way. And so we had a fun celebration that day when we had our closing call about a year or so ago. I also want to just show you a few pictures of the project itself and then happy to take questions. So this was our ribbon cutting on September of 2024. We drew a lot of people. We had about 1,000 folks at our ribbon cutting, including our delegation, our congressional delegation, folks from DC, just celebrating with us. It was a really big deal for our community. A photograph of the project from the outside. Our library, community center, and commercial kitchen on the bottom floor with 3 floors of public parking above it. This is some of the photos of our parking, the solar array, the bike lockers on the top right corner, and some outdoor space on the bottom right-hand corner. This is the interior, our public library space. The service desk in our public library. The children's area, we have the largest children's library north of Seattle. We doubled the space of our old library, public library, which was not renovated since the mid-80s. So that was a huge call from our public to have children's space. This is our community center. So if you're ever coming through Mount Vernon or if you'd like to have an event there, trainings, things like that, we've got this lovely community room. It can seat 300 people for a sit-down event and more than 450 for a training. And then on the roof, this is just a special thing. If you visit us, we wanted to capture every single person that we could think of that was part of our project. And so this panel captures over 1,000 names, the certified payroll of all the workers, but it has names of our Build America Bureau partners on here, our congressional delegation, staffers, architects, things like that. It was really important that everyone was recognized because we realized it was kind of a monumental project all the way around. And so my contact information, you can find me on LinkedIn or certainly email me here at my new role in Whatcom County. But I'm happy then to stop sharing and to have some questions and answers time from all of you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jill. We're
Yeah.
going to get to Q&A. If anyone has a question for Jill on the Mount Vernon Library Commons project, please put that into the Q&A. But I want to shift to our next case study, and then we'll come back and do Q&A at the end of the hour. So traveling south on I-5 down to the Bay Area, we are happy to have with us Priya Mathur, who is the Director of Funding Strategies at Bay Area Rapid Transit, BART. And we are interested in the differences between, obviously, BART being a large organization, how you move through the TIFIA process compared to a small city of Mount Vernon, but also the unique situation that BART was put in as a regional infrastructure accelerator on your own, and how that played into your TIFIA experience. So I'll let you, Priya, take over and tell us more about your project, railcar procurement, railcar upgrades.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm delighted to be with all of you. Let me share my deck. Okay, can everyone see that all right? Great.
Yep, that looks great.
Terrific. So we're here. So the BART, the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District, is here in the Bay Area and in California. And for some reason, my slides are not advancing. There we go. I won't stay on this slide, but I did want to just note that also joining us today is Anais Melange, who is my co-pilot on the TIFIA loan, as well as on the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator. She's our manager of capital financial planning. She'll be available to answer questions later on. So I just want to start with a really quick overview of who BART is. We are truly the foundation of the Bay Area region's transit network. We connect to 20 transit operators around the Bay Area. We have 131 miles of track and 50 stations. We are a rail operator, heavy rail, but we are not a railroad under FRA. So we're in an odd spot there. We serve both suburban and suburban areas. And nearly 90% of the transit transfer trips in the Bay Area involve a leg on BART. So we're truly the spine of the Bay Area. A little bit on our ridership. Before the pandemic, we had roughly 400,000 riders every weekday. You can see on this chart that we are now around 200,000. So we're nowhere near where we were before. And that has impacted both our operating budgets as well as our capital program, largely because before the pandemic, about a third of our operating budget was funded through ridership revenue. And some of that got transferred to our capital program to fund capital investments. Really quickly on our capital program, we have about $1 billion a year capital budget. This shows both what we are forecasting we'll be able to fund over the coming 10 years, as well as the unfunded portion of our program, which we are still continuing to pursue funding for. And because we have about 80,000 capital assets, many of them very large and so very expensive to replace, renovate, et cetera, we have to secure large chunks of funding in advance of implementing a project in many cases. Just to highlight a couple of our key critical capital needs where we continue to fight for funding, particularly around state of good repair and our traction power system, which is what powers the trains, elevator modernization in our 50 stations, and then shops, yards, and facilities, which are very difficult to fund. So that all brought us to a potential TIFIA loan application for what we were calling the Safe, Reliable, and Accessible BART Capital Investment Program. This was a set of projects totaling $7 billion with a maximum financing amount of $950 million. And it included the projects that I've listed here. So the Core Capacity Program, BART Police Headquarters, Traction Power Renovation and Improvements, rail cars, and then station renovation and improvements. But really, the project that was driving our need to secure financing was the BART Police Department headquarters. And what was driving this requirement was that the current building that the BART Police Department was in was not fit for purpose. The systems were aging, it needed a seismic upgrade, and we had slated the property for transit-oriented development, and so needed to be out of the building in time for that TOD effort to begin. Ultimately, we were able to finance it or to fund the project with cash that was released from another project. And I'll go into that in a little bit, as well as a portion of the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator grant that we got in 2023 and some general obligation bond interest earnings that we had from our $3.5 billion general obligation bond issue. So into the meat of the matter, the TIFIA process. So as I said, the BPDHQ project really drove our TIFIA timeline. And as we were submitting the TIFIA letter of interest, we submitted two. One was a TIFIA letter of interest for the rail car project, and the other was a BPDHQ RIF letter of interest. And we were trying to get RIF authorization for a number of reasons, but really primarily because you can finance up to 100% of a project. And at this time, as I noted, BART was having challenges in terms of identifying funding internally from our operating revenue in order to fund the BART Police Department headquarters. But so this really encapsulates all of the efforts that we undertook between March and ultimate close on the loan in October of 24. And you can see at the top there that we were negotiating the loan agreement terms for, a good 4 months. And that is, I'll get back to that when we come to lessons learned. So we did think about, as I noted, whether we should apply for TIFIA or RIF financing. Again, we thought we wanted to fund 100% of the eligible project costs. And we did make a case to the Build America Bureau and the FRA related to the BART's and the BPDHQ's eligibility. This sort of summarizes it, but BART, in addition to managing BART service, we also manage the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority, or CCJPA, which manages the Amtrak service in the region. And there are a number of other things. We have an MOU between BART Police and Amtrak Police. We thought Amtrak Police would also use this BART Police Department headquarters. But ultimately, the timeline for us to get agreement between FRA and the Build America Bureau to allow us to pursue RIF did not meet our required timeline to award a contract on BPDHQ. So ultimately, we decided to go with TIFIA and to choose a different project in order to further accelerate our timeline to an agreement. So why do we consider TIFIA? There are a number of attractive features of the TIFIA program. First, we were able to get a loan on a junior lien basis, which is 2 steps below our existing senior sales tax revenue bond debt. And that at no additional cost, so that does not impact the interest rate that we got. We also got several terms we could not get in the bond market. We were able to defer debt service payments, or otherwise known as capitalized interest, for the first 5 years of the loan. We were able to secure a 35-year term, whereas a typical BART sales tax revenue bond term is 30 years. And that term started after the 5-year deferral period. So final debt service payment is in 2059. As I noted, it's a junior lien, and there's no prepayment penalty, but also no requirement to borrow the full amount. So in a way, it's like a line of credit. And the interest rate, while not quite as good as our sales tax revenue bond rates, was competitive in the environment, particularly when you consider that that's roughly a 30-year interest rate for a 35-year term. We were also trying to fill in what our debt service forecast. So what you can see here is the dark blue at the bottom there is our existing senior sales tax revenue debt. And you can see that it was dropping off in 29 and then again in 37. So one of the things we were trying to do was to push out the debt service so as not to increase near-term debt service and as much as possible fill in the net drop in debt service. As I said, we needed to meet the BART Police Department headquarters contract award date, which we were forecasting for fall of 24. The rail car, we decided to go with the rail car project, really because it was closer to substantial completion, with substantial completion forecast for November of 2024. So that meant that there was less cost risk and less schedule risk in the project. And less delivery risk. And that made it easier and faster to get it through underwriting. We were already receiving rail cars. In fact, we had received, by the time we closed, we had received nearly 750 rail cars. Actually, maybe 774 out of the 775 rail cars by the time we closed. And financing the railcar project enabled us to free up cash that we'd already spent on the project. So BART had spent about $550 million of our own funds on the railcar project. And that was, by financing that project, it allowed us to just free up that cash that could be used for any purpose, including for BPDHQ. Finally, the railcar project was already federalized due to federal grants we had in the project, which was a key consideration. So this is the final result. We closed on the loan in October of 2024 for a not to exceed amount of $545 million. And we submitted our first disbursement requisition at the end of October and received it in January. So here, let me share a few lessons learned. One is read the TIFIA loan agreement template early in the process. Identify key terms that you want to negotiate and seek to reach early agreement. This was, as I noted, we were negotiating the terms for 4 months and we negotiated hard. And so that it was really important for us to identify early what terms were important to us and what we were willing to give on. I would also note that it requires some upfront resource commitment. So we had a staff lead, but also other internal legal and SMEs internal to BART, as well as an external financial advisor and bond counsel who supported the effort. And it's important to note that you're negotiating the loan not just with the Build America Bureau, but with 3 parties, with the Build America Bureau's underwriting team, supported by the financial advisor, by the administering agencies such as FTA or FHWA, and with the USDOT Office of the General Counsel. I spelled that wrong, but Office of the General Counsel, supported by their legal advisor. So I would recommend that you engage the administering agency early at the LOI stage and get them on board, particularly if you're whoever your regional lead is. I also would suggest that you plan early for ongoing reporting and disclosures that are required by the loan. And that is all laid out in the agreement template. But there are requirements on an annual, quarterly, monthly, even within notifications within 5 days of an event occurring or promptly upon the information being available. So I'll shift here to the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator, which, as I noted, we got in 2023. We got a $1.75 million grant. We're so proud to be one of only a handful of recipients of this designation. And we pursued this grant and designation to implement a project portfolio management system, demand management module, which I know is a mouthful, as well as a grant management solution. And I'll share a little bit more on what that means on the next slide. And also to develop capital projects for TIFIA financing to expedite project delivery. And the first project was the BPDHQ project, which as I noted, we spent some of the RIA funds on. So what is demand management? Our current capital program planning is a sort of a patchwork of different systems, Excel models, department, some department specific, and really disjointed and sometimes inconsistent data management, as well as a lot of sort of manual, inefficient capital project prioritization approaches. So what we're hoping this demand management module will do is it will help to migrate from some existing financial systems and some of the ad hoc financial models that we have to track funded and unfunded project costs more coherently. And ultimately to enable us to match projects to funding opportunities by the use of capital and grant attributes. And that is really critical for sort of optimizing your chances of success and also optimizing the use of grant sources for priority projects. We also hope to replace overlapping and inefficient data management systems, to improve the data governance, and to more efficiently analyze capital financial data. The grant solution will do something similar on the grant side, really to standardize our grant processes and enable us to have a central repository for grant-related documentation and data. And it will input into the demand management module so that we're mapping, as I said, the grants to projects. So I'll pause there. I know I covered a lot of territory. I'm very happy to answer any questions, and I know we only have a few short minutes left. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Priya. I think it's fascinating to see how your experience with the TIFIA was kind of hand in hand with your setting up as a RIA, because you use that RIA resource internally in-house to guide where and how you were going to use the TIFIA funds, or RIF, and as initially thought. So very interesting, and I think it's maybe becoming more clear how a RIA can support a project. Obviously not in-house typically, but we here at the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, we are ready to support projects in the same way to identify what's going to work best. Is it RIF, TIFIA, or something else? And how do we move forward on those projects? So thank you, Priya and Jill, for highlighting those two projects. If there's any questions, put them into the chat here. I see a couple that I think are left over from Carl's presentation earlier. So I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions for our two case study presenters. First, I have a question for Jill. And Priya, you mentioned in your presentation that the overall timeline from the beginning of the TIFIA LOI to being awarded was, I think, less than a year.
It was roughly 8 months, but that does not include the time internally to develop the LOI, which itself was a big lift. Yeah.
Right. And I think that speaks to the value of having that RIA resource being able to set you up so that the timeline can be shortened as much as possible. Jill, what about for the Mount Vernon Library Commons project? What was the timeline from start to finish with that LOI to being awarded?
Sure. So I think the very first phone call that we made to the Build America Bureau, from that to when we closed, was about 2 years. And that was, we were kind of flying blind and learning as we went. And so I would say once we actually, maybe submitted the letter of interest, it was more like a year and a half.
Okay. That's more what we expect to see. As Carl mentioned, it's anywhere between 6 months to 12, sometimes 18. And it really depends on kind of what's the preparation before you initially discuss TIFIA with the Bureau before you submit that LOI. So thank you. One other question for you, Jill. You mentioned that you came out of the entire process with just $3 million in debt as a city. How are you paying back the loan through the Library Commons? What's the mechanism?
Yes, so we had different draws just depending on our cash flow of how we went through. But we did have an award through the state that was kind of a revenue sharing award with a rebate of sales tax. So it was a matched award that we had, and that gives us about $1 million for debt service per year.
Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. Great. Carl, if you're still with us, I'd love to ask you a question about Garvey, because I think this applies to a lot of other, a lot of states in the Northwest and a lot of projects that might be interested in TIFIA and RIF. in Idaho, there's been extensive use of GARVI bonds to fund infrastructure projects, but no TIFIA experience to date, as far as we know. How could the state's GARVI experience successfully deliver TIFIA or RIF projects?
Honestly, I would have to do some research on GARVI and what it means. I'm not totally familiar with that program. I would not assume that a state's financing program is the same as TIFIA. GARVI.
Carl, this is Bruce.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not uncomfortable saying I don't know. Certainly do some research.
I think Idaho Transportation Department used a GARVI loan to do some work on Interstate 84 through the Treasure Valley in southern Idaho, and I believe they repaid it just through gas taxes and fees allocation. It was some time ago.
Yeah, and no, fair enough. And just seeing a quick overview of it on FHWA's website, I would have to ask an underwriter. I mean, this seemingly runs contrary to how our programs work, right? But I could run this one up the poll, get some more information.
You know, it might be instructive to share that, and I don't know about GARVI, but that the way the TIFIA loan differs from, like, we use sales tax revenue as the basis for, as the credit for our loan. And it differs from sales tax revenue bonds in that it is more focused on the project and the entity than sales tax revenue bonds. Even if we're issuing sales tax revenue bonds for a project, the TIFIA loan the Build America Bureau wants more information on both the upfront and on an ongoing basis related to the project and the issuer, in terms of operations and, you know, et cetera.
Right. So not super applicable, but we will follow up with this question, Stephen, and with all the questions that have been asked, we'll have the answers provided to you in a follow-up email soon. So not to worry, we'll get more information to you when we can circle back and think about this some more. Well, great. I don't see other questions coming in, but I want to thank both of you, Priya, Jill, Sam, who stepped away, and Carl for presenting today. Really helpful to get an overview of TIFIA, RIF, the federal credit programs, and the experiences that both a small and very large organization have had with TIFIA. What I'd love to do now is kind of end on a what's next note. We would love to stay in contact with all of you, and we really want to highlight that this is just the first in a series of webinars designed to demystify all of these programs and also get you the information that you all need as project sponsors to implement your projects around the region. So looking ahead, please be in touch. Tell us what you're interested in learning about next. This has been a high-level overview of the Build America Bureau's programs, but we would love to dive in more in depth on some of the other areas that we just touched on today. So some ideas, maybe state infrastructure banks, public activity bonds, or private-public partnerships. Any of those topics, if that resonates with you, send us a message and let us know what you'd like to focus on. And as I mentioned earlier, we are here, myself, Bruce, our team, Hannah and Patty are on the call. We are here to support you. So be in touch. Let us know how we might be able to help move your project forward, answer any questions you have. We are really eager to be in contact with all of you, especially Vern. I saw your message about how you're working on a transit-oriented development hub in Great Falls, Montana. I'm going to be reaching out to you to talk more about this. It's a great idea, and we'd love to hear what you're working on. So with that, thank you all for spending some time with us today. We'll end just a few minutes early. Again, Priya, Jill, Carl, Sam, thank you all for your time, and we'll be in touch in the near future.
Thank you.